friends, this is our video on the grid system. You guys are going to be taking notes. You need everything I wrote down, plus you need to fill in the blanks. So as we go through this video, you'll see that I wrote some things. Any blank that you see like this, you need to fill in. I will do my best to point at the blanks as I speak what they need to be filled with. For the grid system, this is a very fun way to take an image that you printed, or maybe an image that you photographed, and transfer it onto another piece of paper. You can either make the image the same size, larger or smaller, and I have examples of most of that. Okay, this method will give you a lot of confidence. And lots of artists use it. So let's begin. First, vocabulary. This belongs in the back of your book. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words. The first one is grid. A grid is a series of evenly spaced horizontal and vertical lines that intersect at 90 degrees. You're going to remember that from perspective, if we've already done perspective. We had a grid made out of horizontal and vertical lines for perspective, and then we also had what's called a radial grid, or a grid that has lines that come out in a circle over top of it. For this, we are only focusing on the horizontal and vertical lines. Accurate. Accurate is a word that means, yeah, that's about right, mostly true, not precise. So if somebody walked up to me and said, hey, what does an inch look like? I may say about that much, and that would be accurate. Precise, on the other hand, is exactly correct in all details. So if somebody said, okay, I understand that that's an accurate measurement of an inch, I want a precise measurement, we would have to get a ruler out, and right there would be our precise inch. Ratio is a word that you may have run into in math. A ratio is a comparison of two or more items expressed in numbers. A lot of times they will look like this: a 1-to-2 ratio, or a 2-to-3 ratio. If we were cooking, if the ratio for, or let's say paper mache, the ratio is 1 part water to 2 parts flour, we would be able to take anything we wanted, even a cup that we drink out of, right? That would be considered 1 unit, and we would fill this with water, and one of these with 2 of these filled with flour mixed together would fulfill that 1-to-2 ratio. We are using ratios when we're talking about enlarging or shrinking. What is the difference between my original image and my final product? Distort or distortion. This is what happens when things start to look weird. If your grid is not precise, maybe you've got some lines that aren't actually parallel to the sides of the paper, or your measurements are not precise, parts of your image will start to look really weird. If we're doing a person, maybe the nose will be way too long or scrunched up, or the eyes will be too close together. Last is a tick mark. A tick mark is just a small mark that we make in order to mark a location. It's not necessarily something that's supposed to stay there, it's just a reference mark. Okay, let's move on to the making. All right, things to remember when you are making a grid. First, OMG, math is everywhere. Right? We're gonna have to do some math. We'll use our logical brain to do this. Measurements aren't always gonna be simple, so you're gonna have to think logically, right? For example, in this image, I decided to divide it into 1.5 inch squares, but I ended up with an extra 3/4 of an inch down here. So that's something I'm gonna have to deal with, right? Numbers are not always easy. Or here's another example. This would be the measurement of this image compared to my really large one. This is 8.5 by 6 3/4, and I want to make it 36 by 24 inches. I don't think those numbers are easily divisible, so we're gonna have to be accurate as opposed to precise with some things. We'll talk about that later. Number 2, always use 3 sets of tick marks when you're measuring. What I mean is the tick marks that I used here, I have 1, 2, 3, okay? We do this because 3 turns out to be a really magic number. If 2 of our tick marks are lining up, but one of them isn't, we know that we made a mistake somewhere and we should probably remeasure a tick mark so we have precise measurements in straight lines with grids that are precise. 3. When you're using your ruler, you need to hold it down by spreading your fingers out and keeping them closer to the center of the ruler. We do this so when we're drawing a line with our pencil, our ruler doesn't actually move or accidentally move, or we don't accidentally end up going over our finger and getting a curve. Spread the fingers out, hold it down firm. 4, using your ruler. This is very important to remember. There is a difference between the edge of your ruler and where measurements start. So you'll notice that this is the edge of my ruler, but the 0 mark doesn't start until down here. They do this for precise measurements because the more you use something, like believe it or not, part of this will wear off as I use it, and then if my measurement started all the way at the end, I would not actually get a full inch from my first measurement. Right? So there's a difference between the edge of the ruler and where 0 begins. Also, you're going to notice different sized lines. Those different sized lines are there for a reason. The longest lines represent inch marks. The second longest lines, or the next shortest, is your halfway. After that, you have ones that equal 1/4, right? Between that, you've got the 1/8 ones. You'll notice all of the 1/8 marks are the same size. All of the 1/4 marks are the same size. All of the half marks are the same size. And all of the inch marks are the same size. Up here in our first inch, it goes the whole way down to 1/16. If that drives your brain crazy, all you have to do is make your 0 the number 1, and then you won't have to deal with them. All right. Let's move on to the steps. Step number 1, find the ratio using logical thinking. You will always be dividing the original image size, it would be our computer printout, by the size of your project. I might have done that backwards. This is the size of your project. This is your reference image. Size of your project divided by reference image. We can also express this in a fraction, which tends to be easier, okay? So here, your project's size goes over your reference image's size, and that will give us a ratio. So, for example, if my original size, how am I going to do this? I like putting the bigger one on the bottom. You just have to keep, all right, so because we've got 2 measurements, basically you just want to keep your reference measurements together and your project measurements together, okay? So let's say my project size is going to be 36 inches by 30 inches, okay? Project size. And my reference image is 6.5 by 4 3/4 inches. So the smaller of those two numbers is 4 3/4 inches. So it's going to go with the smaller number over here. 4 3/4 by 6.5. This is when things get to start crazy, and you should pull a calculator out because I'm using my phone to record this. So I know that 6 times 6 is 36. Oh shoot, I've got an extra one in there. All right, so 36 by 6.5, move the decimal, right? So 65, that's 1. And 10, 0. Let's add another 0. It's going to go in once, and we're going to have a remainder. And then we have to move our decimal back. So I've got 10. So this one, we're going to estimate. We're being accurate, right? 10. And then we need to do this one. So 30 by 4.75, move the decimal twice. Do the same thing over here. Oh geez, 475 into 3,000. Let's round that up to 500. So 500, 1,000, 2,000. So it would be 6, right? So 30, 36, 37, 38, 39, 44, 42, 43, 44, 45. What's 6 times 4? 20, 24, plus 4 is 28, 0, 5, 1. 150, we'll add a 0, 1, 2, we'll estimate that at 3, so 63, right? And we've got like a 10 to 63 ratio. That is crazy. We can simplify that to, let's just call it 1 to 6, okay? So this is what we call, it's just accuracy, and we're trying to make it easy for ourselves. And I'm calling it 1 to 6 because if I take this 3 and make it a 0, it's 1 to 6, okay? So just remember, always compare the longest measurement to the longest measurement, meaning the long side of your reference image to the long side of your project, and the shortest edge, or the short edge of your reference, to the shortest edge of your project. We are going for accuracy here. Step number 2. You need to decide on the grid size for your original image. Make sure you consider how much detail will be in each square. So for this one, I decided 1.5. And I did that because looking at like 1.5 inches on here, I'm like, okay, I can totally deal with what's going on in a 1.5 by 1.5 inch square. Okay, so, and then you are going to multiply the grid size of your original image by the ratio that represents the size of your project. Okay, multiply the grid size of your reference image by the ratio that represents the size of our project. So that would be the 1 to 6. So if I have 1.5 inches here, I need to make this grid 1.5 by 1.5 inches, but my project, I need to multiply that by 6, right? Times 6. Which means on my project, my inches for my squares will be 9 by 9 inches. It's going to make it larger, okay? For example, 1.5 for my original. If I have a 1 to 6 ratio, I need to multiply this by 6. This is my reference, grid size. This is my ratio. Comes from the number representing how big I want it. I'm going to multiply Don't forget that decimal. This equals project grid size. Now we need to create the grid, and when we do that, we are going to focus on precision. All right, I already did half of this grid to save you guys some time. I'm gonna do my vertical lines now. So the first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna line my 0 up with the edge, and I'm gonna measure every 1.5 inches. I am lining my marker. I decided to use a marker for this one because it's going to be easier to see. And I'm measuring every 1.5 inches. Now you can do the math. You can say, okay, 1.5, 3, 4.5, 6. If counting like that is too much for you, you can count 1/2 inches. There are 3 1/2 inches in every 1.5 inches. So I go 1, 2, 3, mark. 1, 2, 3, mark. 1, 2, 3, mark. 1, 2, 3, mark. Now you're probably noticing here that I have some extra left over, and I've got that down on my bottom too. That's okay, I'll show you how to deal with it in a second. I'm doing 3 sets of tick marks. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then, and I've got to look real carefully because there's a lot of dark stuff on here, right? I am going to find those tick marks. There's one, and there's one. I'm going to double check to make sure that I am actually parallel. I'm actually not sure about that one, so I'm going to start down here. 1, 2, 3. There are my 3 tick marks. See, since I used a marker or a Sharpie in this case, it is way easier to see my lines over this black and white image. Oh, and it looks like I messed up there. I can tell because that's not parallel. And it looks like the 2 lines that are accurate are... Tell you what, we're just gonna throw another 3 in there. So 1.5, 3, 4.5. Cool. Oh, there we go. 1, 2, 3. Looks good. Draw my line. Oh, what's going on? See, everyone makes mistakes. Oh, yes, they do. There we go. So there's my grid. Cool. Then I would transfer. Now this one I did not make 9 times bigger. That one is actually at school. I'm gonna see it on Tuesday, and I'll bring pictures in for you so you can see the difference. But this one I decided to do just twice as big. So these squares are 3 by 3 inches. And to deal with this right here, what I did is I just measured the size of it. It was 3/4 inch, and I multiplied by my ratio again. So if this were gonna be 9 by 9, I would measure 3/4 inch by 9. In this case, it's a 1:2 ratio, so I measured 3/4 inch by 2, which gives me 1.5 inches. So I threw that on the bottom. Cool. Now I've got my grid, both my grids. Next, step 3, transfer the image using spatial thinking. We get to turn our logical brain off now. We're going to focus on accuracy again as opposed to precision. When we measured our grids, we were being precise, right? Now we're going to be focusing on accuracy. So Number 1, you guys are gonna focus on where the lines enter and exit each square. Where this line comes out and where it goes in. I'll show you in a second. 2, focus on the shapes created within each square. You can use both positive and negative space. This is basically a triangle, so for that line you would want to create a similar triangle. Or a similar, would that be a trapezoid? I'm not sure it's a trapezoid. I think it's just a quadrigram, a shape with 4 sides. 3, block out extra information to help your logical brain stay quiet. Remember, we're using the spatial side of our brain. So what you can do is you can take pieces of paper or index cards or anything really that works, and you can lay it down to block out all of the extra information, so all you see is what's in that little square, and that's all you focus on. It's going to help make things easier. And number 4, when you're finished, you need to erase your grid lines, friends. It's a craftsmanship issue. So let me show you real quick how we would transfer a square. Now what you're going to notice here, I'll start on a bottom square so you can actually see it. I've got a table in the way. You want to make sure your squares line up, right? So I'm going to start with this square right here. I'm not doing this one. I just totally got rid of it. I said, nope, don't need it, not doing it. You guys are allowed to do that. You're the artist. It's called artistic liberty. All right, I'm going to do this one. I'm going to block out extra information. I am going to focus on where lines enter and exit the square. So I've got a line right here, and I'm going to call that, it's not quite half, but almost half. So I'll find half, and then I'll come over here because it's like right about here. And then this one is like a third. And then what I'm going to do is focus on this shape. I'm not drawing a horse. Instead, I am just copying lines. Okay? That is the way that line moves. And then you can move on to your next square. So let's block out extra information so we don't go crazy, right? Clearly I'm coming in over here and I'm exiting what looks like it's, again, not quite half. And I've got like this triangle thing going on here. Goes like this. And I've also got, whoop, that shape. Cool? Oh, I have part of a neck here. From here to like here. Okay? Now, if a square gets super duper complicated, what you can do is you can grab your ruler and you can divide that into more squares, and then divide your square here into even more squares, so you can just like get those details in those little squares. All right, now I just want to show you what happens, because once I finish this, I want to get rid of all of these grid lines. I want to get rid of them. All right, and I'll show you what happens when you don't do that in a second. Actually, we'll come back to this. Let's do that now. All right, so, all right, so this is like an ink painting that Jeremy's cousin did, and he gave it to us, and it's very nice, but it does have some craftsmanship issues. Number 1, I can tell he used a grid. You see those lines there? You can still see them. That's because he didn't erase them before he painted. See, you can get rid of the grid lines over here in the face because there's no ink there, but there is a line on the microphone. This is an attention to detail issue, right? That's all it is. Cool. Oh, Here's an example of cutting stuff off. So I'm gonna paint this picture on here, and what you're gonna notice is there are different sizes. All I did is I cut the bottom part of this off. I decided I didn't want the bottom part. And here's another example of like a smaller image blown up real big. The grid system helps you do that. All right? Okay, cool. Last, I promise. Why learn this skill? Number 1, you will get accurate results that you can really be proud of. This will build your confidence. 2, it strengthens your spatial thinking skills. So if you sit down to draw a portrait of somebody that you enjoy, even though you can't put a grid on real life, you will have practice focusing on edges and lines and copying them down exactly as you see them. 3, lots of artists use this method. And the cool thing is it makes people who think art is magic mad, because it ruins the magic for them and they realize that artists are just people who have learned and practiced a skill. And 4, it makes you feel good, all right? So tomorrow or next time I see you, we will begin practicing this method. We'll start slow, we'll just make a grid, and then I'll walk you through the process of transferring images. See ya.